on World Refrigeration Day. Today's program is on refrigeration plant controls for safety and energy efficiency with a case study of ice cream plant. It is presented by Mr. Anand Sriram Joshi, who is the General Manager of Manik Engineer. Mr. Anand Sriram Joshi is a BE Industrial Electronics graduate from University of Pune with more than 29 years of experience in working with refrigeration plants, cold rooms, food processing and freezing industries all over the India. He is a past president of Association of Ammonia Refrigeration and ISHRE Pune chapter. He is also member of ASHRE, Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, Indian Institute of Electronic and Telecommunication Engineers, Indian Dairy Association, and RATA. We are very privileged to have such a prolific speaker for today's session. Before getting program, let's quickly see on disclaimer. The information provided with this webinar is for general information purpose only. While we try to keep the information up to date and correct, there are no representations or warranties expressed or implied about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the information, product, service, or related graphic content in the webinar for any purpose. Any use of this information at your own risk. We do not guarantee or declare that the information on webinar is accurate and correct. We are not responsible, not can be held liable for any errors or height years in the content. Speaker. The views expressed in the presentation made at webinar or other webinars are those of the speaker and not necessarily of ISHRE. Presentations or the presence does not constitute any endorsement of the vendor or speaker views, products, or services. Thank you. Over to Anand, sir. You can start the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity to be with ISHRE and to start the World Refrigeration Day. I think it's already started in New Zealand now, considering the timing. Okay. So maybe we are the first people to do the World Refrigeration Day worldwide, because it's 12 o'clock in New Zealand now. So welcome all. Thank you ISHRE Chennai chapter for giving me this opportunity to talk about control safeties for ammonia refrigeration industry on this ISHRE platform. And thank you all of you for joining us today on this event. I'll just try to brief you what we are trying to cover into this seminar, today's presentation. First is, as this is about ammonia, I'll just try to give you a brief information about ammonia refrigerant. Then as top automation, why automation is required. Most of the times we see automation in our life. In last few years, our day-to-day use of automation has changed a lot. Our phone telephone systems from a ring dialer, black set at home has been changed to very highly sophisticated smartphones. Our automation of cars has been changed. There's now so many things happen by a click of a button in car or in our TV. You don't have to move in your house to operate your devices. You just say, hey, Google, and Google does that work for you. But unfortunately, some automations of systems are not that popular or used into the refrigeration systems or not into the all levels. So just try to tell you what can be done, what is being done. I'll try to share with that. Also, we'll talk about different types of refrigeration systems which are particularly used in ammonia refrigeration systems. And I'll try to give you a brief case study where how the energy efficiency and safety achieved in a 20-year-old plant which was manufacturing ice cream. So let's just start with our basics about ammonia refrigeration. As Vijay Bhaskar sir told us that refrigeration is being used for various applications. Ammonia is the most prominent refrigerant, a natural refrigerant which is being used into different applications. Whether you want to freeze the product, you want to chill the product, you want to make it hygienic and efficient. This applications, whether meat, poultry, seafood, for peas, corns, everything is frozen using ammonia as a refrigerant. The larger the freezing plants, the larger capacities you go, you get the you go for ammonia for efficiency and of course the safety. The very large storage of products, the chemical manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, all cannot happen without ammonia as a refrigerant. And as our COVID situation is there, we all know that availability of fresh food, whether it's vegetables or meat, is very difficult to get, but you can get frozen foods very easily and conveniently delivered to your doors. We can talk about one of my customer, he has a tagline for freezing products. He says that freezing food is fresher than fresh because it is processed immediately after the harvesting or the slaughtering and immediately frozen. So it maintains better quality and better taste. That's because of the refrigerant. Freezing refrigerant technology. This refrigerant technology has been there. We are all using it for, it is coming to you many times. You are buying a potato in Chennai, which is not produced in Chennai, but it's produced somewhere in maybe in UP, and it's delivered to you by through every day. Trucks come from Agra to UP, and those they're the stores, and you never get a shortage of potato because there are plenty of storage of potato in India. In fact, when I had a discussion with Cold Storage Association chairman, they told me that we have 14,000 potato cold storages in India. That's a mass and large potato which gives storage, which gives us a continuous supply of potatoes through 365 days in a. So that's how the refrigeration industry help us. This slide tells you, different temperatures or which are classified into C, C1, F, which products are stored into different temperature range. It's basically just tell you idea like from 10 degree to minus 20 degree as the temperatures are used for storage of the food. If you go for freezing, normally they are around minus 30 to minus 40. Sometimes you also have minus 45 degrees temperature for freezing. That depends on the product and time required. It's just a brief template about showing how the products are stored. As I was telling you, the ammonia, it is one of the oldest and one of the long-running refrigerant. Why we say ammonia? It's a natural refrigerant. It's been in industry for more than 125 years, but 145, almost 150 years, and it's still going on. If you see many refrigerants has come, gone. Typically a refrigerant like you can see refrigerant like CO2. Ammonia is there since 75 and continuing. CO2 was there before ammonia, then it was discontinued, and now we are again having plants with CO2 or CO2 ammonia systems. CFCs, HCFCs, many of them have come and gone and on way are going out. So this is all. Ammonia is the only one who you can see going throughout the life cycle of these refrigerant plants. So why we have to have this ammonia as a refrigerant? It is one of the oldest refrigerant. It is produced, is a byproduct of the fertilizer plant. So the cost is very, very low as compared to any other refrigerant. Typically, you can get ammonia at around $1 USD per kg in India, whereas another refrigerants like 404A will cost you around 8 to 10 USD per kg. It is the most highest efficient refrigerant. It has got no effect on the environment, 0 ODP and 1 GWP. That is ozone depletion potential is 0 and global warming potential is less than 1. So this is another thing. It is a one component. It is not mixture of gases. So it is thermodynamically more stable refrigerant. It is not miscible in oil. So you can very easily separate out the oil which is required for your compressors cooling and compressors operation, and doesn't have to have effect on your refrigerant system. And if you consider the capacity, the latent heat of, we'll show you the slide how the latent heat of ammonia is higher than others HCFC, CFC friends. So that's why you need a smaller sizes of the equipment, line sizes for the similar refrigeration capacity. And in India, this refrigerant grade ammonia is very easily available. As I told you, it has got this byproduct of the fertilizer plants, and it's very easily manufactured. Secondly, the last point, which is not the least, is that many times you buy plants with the HCFC or CFCs, and due to ban or the change in the due to their effects onto the environment, you have to scrap those plants and go for again a new refrigerants. Whereas in case of ammonia, it's a natural refrigerant. There is no limitations of using it, as it is most environment friendly. So no need to scrap this refrigerant. This table shows you the COP, or the as we call it, the coefficient of performance of various refrigerants. Typically, you can see it at 40-degree condensing, which is a typical Indian application. Right, whether you have a 2-degree evaporating, you have -5, -25, -40. That is a freezing plant, a storage, positive temperature storages, chilling plants. Any application, ammonia has the highest COP. That is the coefficient of performance. And as we know, since 2000, new equipment, they are not allowed to use. Some of the refrigerants are not used for low temperature applications. Other refrigerants, they do have a refrigerant glides and other effects. Such things they can with ammonia. So this is what it is. The cheapest refrigerant I told you, and I also told you it has got operating cost is much lower. How it's much lower, we'll see. This is what I was talking about, efficiency and why we need smaller equipments. Other than water, you have the highest latent heat of for ammonia. Those who are in the refrigeration industry, they know the latent heat. It is the heat of vaporization that is absorbed when a substance changes from phase to liquid to gas. So when we evaporate a refrigerant using a heat from a product, that's what the heat is transferred from refrigerant to product. Ammonia has got highest heat capacity. That is 1247.5 kilojoules per calorie. If you see all others, they are almost 1:5 ratio if you consider ammonia and other refrigerants. So that's why you need smaller components. You have a more efficient and more stable refrigeration system. These are some of the examples when you compare with R404A and ammonia, or say 20,500 metric ton cold store. It has got only 50 TR. It's a small refrigeration capacity. But if you look at the kilowatt power required, is almost ammonia requires only 58 kilowatt, whereas Freon, this R404A need 103 kilowatts. It's -3 plus 40, -3 plus 52 condensing, because most of these plants are air cooled one. And these are all the data compiled by Association of Ammonia Refrigeration through the site surveys. If you go for a freezing application, we have a freezing of vegetables, peas, corn, seafood, meat, chicken, ice cream, everything is frozen. These are all the frozen products which has got a long-term storages. And then we have much, much higher energy efficiency with ammonia. Typically for a freezing plant with a capacity of 100 kilo, you can see it's around 50 TR or 50 kilowatt capacity. We have 52 TR of refrigeration capacity. We have, which is again a very small plant. In India, now we have plants of 300, 400 TR. So if you had a 52 TR, we get 121 kilowatt for ammonia, whereas same R404A plant, you need 326 kilowatts. You can consider how much cost or how much money you spend when we put it, if we don't go to the ammonia, and why we have to go to the ammonia. As I was talking about environmental effects, ammonia as compared to HCFCs, CFCs, HFCs, HCs, everything you compare, ammonia is the best one. It has got the zero ozone depletion potential, less than 1 global warming potential, considering the 100 years effect. Only those who come near to ammonia is CO2, which is a natural refrigerant. But in India, particularly, CO2 has a limited application because CO2 pressures are very high, and we have to go for the cascade systems when you're using in CO2. So considering the cost of the equipment, cost of the running cost, ammonia becomes most efficient. Sometimes there is a misconceptions or the marketing efforts of the non-ammonia people. They says that ammonia is flammable. It's totally wrong one. Ammonia is extremely hard to ignite and it requires minimum 650 degrees centigrade to ignite. When you have around 20, and that is has to be have around 16 to 27% into the atmospheric pressure into your area. So it's not a flammable refrigerant. And as we know, if we are reaching 650 degrees centigrade, including human body, so many things will burn. We use natural gas at our home and it's so many applications for cooking purpose. Now the natural gas is provided to us by this Gas Authority of India and other their companies by pipe. And ammonia is this natural gas is ammonia ignition energy is 50 times higher than the natural gas. So ammonia cannot burn without support of flame. It means ammonia cannot burn on its own. It can burn only when you have another flame there. So ammonia is not flammable. It's a misconception or there is a, I say the mismarketing of these things. Then toxicity. Yes, ammonia is a toxic gas and it's may have a harmful effects on the human body, but it has got a pungent odor. So if we have ammonia as low as 5 ppm, it can be very easily detected by a smell by human nose and can very easily smell it. The internationally and also now in India, the TWL value is 30 ppm. It means if you are working for in ammonia environment with 30 ppm leakage, you can work for 8 hours and there will not be any effect on you. This tables gives you the various effects to the human body are subject to the ammonia. Please note that these all are subject to the per hour things. So if you are exposed to 150 to 200 ppm for 1 hour, then you have this effect. If you are exposed for 15 minutes, nothing is going to happen. So these are all time weighted, basically the figures. And definitely, like we use our cars in petrol and we take safety measures, or we use the cylinders at home and we have safety measures, we can take safety measures for ammonia to avoid these toxicity effects. So the question comes in then, why we want to do the automation? When I started my career and I used to visit the plants, the power cost was not low. Plants used to have a very small. So many times customer used to say, why I should go for this automation? My operator can operate the plant and I don't need to worry about the electricity bill. Electricity cost is much low. But as the time changes, the electricity cost has gone up. There is no possibility of electricity theft has also gone. Everything is now electronic monitoring and the plant sizes is going big. So electricity becomes very, very crucial when you are running a refrigeration plant. So now when your plant becomes big, it is difficult to operate your compressors, start, stop, load, unload, depending on your load requirements. It is very difficult to throttle the valves at different locations. It's not possible to open and close the valves at different positions when you want to shut down or you want to unload the compressors. Most importantly, like a bigger cold storage warehouses or the freezing plants, it is very difficult to record the temperatures or other parameters manually going there every time. It's very difficult to go inside a -20-degree room and record temperature for every half an hour. And of course, the energy, as I told you, energy becomes very crucial and the cost of energy is becoming important. It is affecting the overall plant operation. And then what happens is when these plants become big and humans recording and are operated by human being, it becomes there are errors and inefficiencies. I've seen some plants where operator used to throttle the valves on the receiver so that liquid feeding is less to the evaporator, and he will partially unload the compressor and sleep in the night. So what happens is the plant runs continuously for longer time, spends a lot of energy, don't get the results, and the owner pays for the energy cost. Many times plants need to operate like you have a multi-facility cold storage, which is storing products from -20 to +5 degrees centigrade. You may have different operating conditions. You all need to control and make it automatic, less depend on human, and use human beings for other more efficient use of them. And of course, as I said, ammonia is toxic. We need safety measures. We have to implement safety measures to make plant safe for human being to operate. And of course, the energy efficiency, as we are talking about, is one of the most important part. And so when we say the automation, which are the things which need to automate into ammonia refrigerant plant? One is the level, there's a liquid level. And we'll just see some of the things why we need to control liquid level. But as I told you, as we all know, the heat transfer takes from liquid to vapor phase in a evaporator to liquid level. The pressures or all systems are pressure temperature dependent systems. We need to maintain a constant pressures. Of course, when you are storing or processing a product, we need to maintain the temperature. That is the most objective of the refrigerant plant. We need to maintain temperature below ambient temperatures, and that's the reason we have refrigerant plants. Some of the cases like potato cold storage, we need to monitor the carbon dioxide emission from potatoes. We have to, when we are having a juicy products like grapes or oranges or apples, we need to maintain the relative humidity so that the moisture or water content into the product does not shrink and you get the fresh product even after 6 months. And sometimes we need to maintain ethylene or other gases depending on the product. If you are storing apple, you may have ethylene generation due to which will ripen the products very fast. So you have to monitor ethylene. Like this various gases we need to monitor and control so that product storage and life is better. When we talk about, what about performance and safety, we talk about efficiency. Efficiency can be implemented right from the designing of the plant by selecting the components, considering the plant operation, location of the plant, how the plant is going to be operated. Some of the places you find the cold storage is loaded for in 2 months and then kept it locked for 4 months and start unloading after 4 months. And whereas in some cases, the cold storages are particularly close to the big cities like Chennai, Mumbai, are operated daily basis. There is a loading and unloading every day. So considering all these things, you need to consider those requirements of the plant operation and design the plant to give the most energy efficient. You can have a multiple compressors, or you have a dairy plant where you are processing milk on a very large scale. You can go for a one bigger compressor. Similarly, equipments can be divided onto that. All this, the beauty of ammonia refrigeration is it is a custom design plant. So you are not buying the ready-made products and trying to fix it into your requirement. This is totally a custom built, custom design plant. So it suit to your plant efficient and most better performance rates. Of course, the quality of control system and control logic used decides the efficiency of the plant. When you are designing too much of over design, sometimes people say, okay, let's design by 20%, 25% more. Hey, that cost money in terms of initial, and also cost money when you want to have those running cost and unnecessary expenditures. Whereas sometimes you under design the plant and then you spend money on longer running hours, and sometimes you don't get the achieved temperatures. Your product temperatures are not achieved. So this all need to understand and finalize it. As I told you, the loading, unloading the plant. So how this energy efficiency, why I talk so much of energy efficiency? This chart shows you how much energy is consumed in a refrigeration plant from a typical applications. If you have a milk and milk products, 30% energy is consumed into the refrigeration side. Ice cream, Same thing, it goes 70% into the your refrigeration plant. If it is a cold storage, where 90% energy is consumed into the refrigeration plant. So whatever you save here, like you have a frozen fruits and vegetable plant, you are spending 70% into refrigeration. You save 5%, and that totally you save 5% in the refrigeration. That is a huge saving to you in your income, or that is a net money in your pocket. So having an efficient plant, or either by design or by modification, upgradation, is very important. As I told about the pungent, and ammonia is a pungent system, so we need to have, and because of toxicity, we need to have safety systems, particularly for the ammonia's safety, more importantly for the ammonia's toxicity. So when we are selecting a control does not mean only the electronic monitoring system or a PLC system, but it's very important to have the correct size of the final actuating devices. In a control system, we always have the sensors, we have the controller which compares your set point and compares your actual process parameter and gives you an error signal. That finally the error signal has to modulate or operate the final control element which is installed in your line. In ammonia refrigeration system, for any refrigeration systems, have control valves or on-off valves or other types of valves in liquid line, in suction line, in wet return line, dry return line, in hot gas supply line or condensate return line. So different application, different locations need a different type of a control and different way of selecting the control. So what we need data when we are selecting these controls. Need to understand the refrigerant use, type of the system, whether it's gravity feed, direct section expansion, or liquid overfeed pump recirculation. In case of a pump recirculation, because we are circulating higher capacity of the liquid, must understand the recirculation ratio, the evaporating temperatures, pressures into that particular evaporator, and location wise, the refrigerant inlet temperatures, condensing temperatures, capacity of individual evaporators. Just as the parameters I'm trying to share, but this will see more and more when we go into the control parts. Which are the controls typically used into? It is refrigeration. It's the liquid level controls. As I said, as I told you, first we need to monitor the level. So we need to have a level controllers, level transmitters, switches to generate alarms. To operate those levels through this, we need to have a solenoid valves so we can cut off the liquid feeding. We need to have solenoid valves for implementing hot gas defrosting. We'll talk about defrosting more when we go there. When we are talking about safety, we need to have the safety valves, like we have a safety valve even on our pressure cooker. And then we need to have the systems which take care of maintaining pressure, like automatic purging system, ammonia dehydration system, and regulating control valves, pressure regulating valves. And electronically, when we talk about electronically, it could be a compressor control system, PLC system, depending on the type of the compressor, piston compressor, screw compressor, multiple compressors. We need to have a data logging system, data recording system. It can be using a data logger for temperature, pressure, humidity, ethylene, CO2 gases. It can have a local indication as well as centralized record and monitoring indication. We need to have defrosting systems. In ice bank tanks, we need to measure the thickness of the ice and operate the ice thickness. Of course, for safety part, we need to have ammonia detection system, most important thing. And I told you, for monitoring different parameters, we need to have sensors. And nowadays, we have a lot of plants which has automation systems available, right from a very basic level to very high-tech level, which can be monitored through your mobile. You can control it through mobile. You can have centralized systems. So this is all about basically what we need to have or what we have. Now let's try to see what are the systems, typical systems which are used into the ammonia refrigeration systems. Three types of systems are popular in ammonia refrigeration, particularly because we are talking about vapor compression system. One is a direct expansion system or DX system, which has been there since inception of the refrigeration. Then we have a called natural circulation or a gravity feed system. And then we have a liquid overfeed system, also being popularly known in India as a ammonia pump overfeed system or ammonia pump feed system. Let's see what are the components of direct expansion system. This is one of the most old and conventional system. We have condenser, compressor, and you can see the evaporator and high pressure receiver. The smaller systems, sometimes you eliminate the high pressure receiver, but typically you can see the liquid coming from the condenser goes to the expansion device. It's called thermostatic expansion valve, and then you have a distributor which distributes this expanded liquid into evaporator. Whatever the liquid comes in gets evaporated due to the external heat of the product, and then that gas goes back to the compressor. Compressor rises the temperature of the refrigerant higher than the ambient temperature, so that condenser can cool it. Condenser can be water cooled, air cooled, or different types like evaporative or the atmospheric or the shell and tube or plate heat exchanger. And then again, the liquid comes back into the system. What happens is here, the system was in use a long time back, and then it mostly got discontinued due to certain limitations of this system. These limitations are mainly because of the thermostatic expansion valve. As I told you, ammonia and oil are not miscible. Oil remains separately and floats on ammonia. When the oil used to accumulate into this thermostatic expansion valve or in the evaporator side, whole system performance used to fail. And then the expansion valve will not operate properly. You will not be able to maintain the temperature. And those distributors used to get choked and whole system used to fail. So that's why and second part was the capacity of the expansion valve. Expansion valve were available in limited capacities. As the plant become bigger and bigger and operating multi-temperatures, the capacity wise, the expansion valve becomes more and difficult to get operated. Also, ammonia has been used in different temperatures, so tuning the expansion valve for different temperatures becomes a bit difficult. So now, but as the time evolves, these refrigeration systems. Secondly, which part I sorry to forgot, there's a superheat. All the thermostatic expansion valve operate on 5 to 8 degrees of superheat, and the superheat makes you pay for the energy. The higher the superheat you have, superheat in the gas, you pay more for the energy. But as the time evaporates, DX systems get replaced by the another systems, by like gravity feed system, and then by the pump liquid for overfeed systems. But as plant grow bigger and bigger, the volume quantity of the ammonia becomes a concerning issue, and then the DX systems come back again, and they come with the electronic expansion valves. So what has happened here is that instead of having a thermostatic expansion valve, which was not performing good with ammonia and oil effects, this electronic expansion valve totally operates without anything to do with ammonia and oil. In electronic expansion valve, there are two types. We'll just see this pulse width modulated valves and the stepper motor valves. Smaller capacities, normally pulse width modulated valves are used, and for higher capacities, we use stepper motor valves. So this electronic expansion valve has again changed the game in favor of DX systems. Now, and as it is sold, ammonia was always considered for the larger plants and higher capacity plants. Now, with the electronic expansion valve, smaller capacity ammonia plants can also be built and can very easily be executed. So this you can have now multiple evaporator ammonia plant. If you see the most of the components like compressor oil separator, high pressure receiver, condenser, these all things remain same. What we have here is an electronic expansion valve. It can also have a hot gas defrosting systems, And this return is taken into one suction trap or suction accumulator, whatever you call it as. It can also use to separate the oil, and then the gas goes back to the refrigerator. So this kind of multiple systems, DX systems, are also now getting popular, particularly because of these electronic expansion valves. So these are the expansion devices which has been used into DX systems. These are the most critical part, the most important part of a DX system. As we know, we have a bulb, we have this diaphragm assembly over here, which is with a bulb connected here. This bulb is normally filled with a combination of refrigerant, which operates on your temperature. This bulb is now connected to the outlet of your evaporator. So depending on the temperature of the evaporator, the the liquid in this bulb, or the gas in the bulb, pressure changes of that gas, which acts on the diaphragm on this diaphragm onto the thermostatic expansion valve power assembly. And this the pressure works against the spring pressure, or the pressure which is set by using this manual spindle. We normally call this setting of superheat. So whatever the temperature difference it operates, this pushes down the piston down, and the valve starts opening. And the liquid, the high temperature liquid which is coming through, is becomes, because of the smaller orifice, it gets expanded and goes to the outlet, to your distributor system. This is a typical expansion valve, functionally almost similar to any thermostatic expansion valve used into other refrigerants, synthetic refrigerants. As I told you, the evolution has come. Now we have these electronic expansion valves. Electronic expansion valves can be a pulse width modulated valves or a motorized valves. Pulse width modulated valve means that the on-off cycle of this valve is controlled by the temperature difference. If we see these sensors, normally sensors are used to sense the ambient temperature and your evaporating temperature of your refrigerant, and the electronic controller will sense the difference between the two temperatures and operate this valve or modulate the on-off cycle of this pulse width valve. Typically, it's designed like from 1 second in 6 seconds to maybe 5 seconds in 6 seconds. Like that, it is on and off. Whereas the motorized valves, which are the so-called step motor valves, are used for bigger plants and bigger operations. Bigger capacity valves are available. They have a step motor on the top, and it is connected to your electronic controller, which again senses the temperature difference across the evaporator. You can also, many controllers can also use the pressure and temperature at the outlet of evaporator. It depends on your requirement, and depending on the superheat, it opens and closes this motorized valve. This gives you fine control into the superheat. As low as 2 degrees superheat can be maintained using electronic expansion valve. That saves a lot of energy. Earlier, this thermostatic expansion valve used to operate around 5 to 8 degrees superheat. Now that has brought down to 2 degrees centigrade. That's a huge energy saving. Of course, the only limitation is right now the cost of these expansion valves is very high. Then we have the natural circulation systems or ammonia gravity fed systems. As we was talking about, you have the similar plant, you have a compressor, the discharge of the compressor goes to the condenser where it is condensed and liquid gets accumulated into receiver. Now this receiver, normally you have a high pressure, something around say 12 to 14 kg per centimeter square, depending on your ambient conditions and conditions. Then liquid is fed into individual evaporator through a solenoid valve and a hand expansion valve. What the function of hand expansion valve is to reduce this high pressure to the corresponding pressure of the temperature you required into the evaporator. Normally, evaporator is provided with a float switch or the level controller, which maintains, which makes sure that this evaporator is fully flooded. The more and more liquid is maintained into the evaporator, the Depending on the this level controller will sense the level and will operate the solenoid valve, gives on-off signal to your solenoid valve. This function is similar, something like that. We use a float switch into our water tanks in our home. Like when water level drops down, the float valve goes down and the cork opens. Now when water level comes up, the cork ball goes up and closes the cork. Similar function is achieved here using an electronic level controller and solenoid valve. When we are having multiple applications, multiple temperatures, depending on our requirement, we can have a differential pressure regulation system. So like having a back pressure regulator help us to maintain two different temperatures in one common section. Like for example, we have an ice plant where our ice production is at minus 10 degrees centigrade and we have ice storage at plus 2 degrees centigrade. So your compressor can work at minus 10 and produce the ice and also maintain plus 2 in your cold storage room by using a back pressure valve or a evaporator pressure regulating valve. This schematics typically shows you how the liquid travels from receiver, it goes to the expansion valve into the accumulator, back to the evaporator, the gas. The return from evaporator comes into this accumulator, or we call it as a liquid separator. The liquid falls down and the gas goes to the compressor. The gas, when it comes to the compressor, compressor compresses gas and rises its pressure so that it can get condensed into the condenser. The schematic shows different controls and applications. We'll see more controls of this in detail. This is a typical application of a gravity feed system. Gravity feed system is most popular system in India. It's been there more than 40 years in India, 45 years now in India. It uses in different applications, different locations. We have this cold storage room. We have a float control and solenoid valve typically, which operates depending on the level in this coil, the liquid will be maintained. We can implement hot gas defrosting. Now, what happens is when we are running these cold storages, particularly very low temperatures, right from 0 degree to minus 40. So whenever these plants are running at low temperature, there is always an ingress of air when the doors are operated or or frequent operation of doors during the loading, unloading of the cold rooms. The moisture in that air gets accumulated onto the evaporator coil, and that moisture becomes a frost. Now, frost is nothing but it's like an ice, and when we have such high frosting on a coil, as we all know, ice is a bad conductor of heat. So when frosting happens on a coil, coils stop functioning, the main function of coil, which is evaporator coil, which is a heat transfer. That function reduces and then stops. So what we have to do is remove that frost. Lesser the frost we maintain, we have a more efficient system. And that's why I was talking right from the initial stage, defrosting. We need to remove this frost. It's called the defrosting. Defrosting can be done in different ways. Most popular, the oldest one was the defrosting a coil by using air defrost. Air defrost means you shut off the plant, maybe keep the door open for a few hours, and because of the increase in the temperature, increase in the room temperature, the coil defrosts. Typically, like you have a freezer which is operated for 2 hours to maybe 6 hours in a batch and twice in a day. So after 12 hours or 14 hours of operation, rest of the 10 hours freezer is not operational. So it might get defrosted because there is no further refrigerant coming in and doors are kept open of the freezer. The frost will melt and the water may get drained. But when you have a cold storage, which is running 24 hours, 365 days, you can't afford to switch it off. So alternative system available was using a water. There were water sprinklers provided onto the top of the coil. And whenever you want to defrost the evaporator, you cut off the ammonia supply, switch off the fans and start water. So water temperature being ambient temperature around 28 to 30 degrees centigrade will slowly start defrosting the frosting on the coil. But what's the limitations? It's a simple way, have a water and drain it. The limitations where the one is the time required. Normally, typically you need 45 minutes to 1.5 hours to defrost coil, depending on the thickness of the frost. Secondly, as the low temperatures, you have a smaller spin spacing, water flowing through everywhere becomes very difficult. Third part is you are wasting the water. Initially, nowadays, we all know water is very precious, very important, and I'm sure people in Chennai understand the value of water better than anybody else. So that wastage of water, energy required to pump that water was another concern. Say third option, which is still many people use, is electrical heaters. Like they insert the electrical heaters into the coil, and then they run the when you switch off the liquid feed supply, cut off the fans, you switch on the electrical heaters and melt that ice. What a waste of energy. You are wasting energy. The energy which requires huge cost to produce has been used is wasted in defrosting those, just defrosting those things. And again, the typically typical a cold storage of 500 metric ton or having a 500 metric ton having 3 evaporators. Each evaporator has got around 15 to 20 kilowatts of heater, and you need to run it for almost 45 minutes to 1 hour. And you got 3 or 4 evaporators in a room, and you're almost spending more than 100 kilowatts for defrosting purpose, which is a lot of waste and huge cost. So what is the alternative? The best alternative available is use the hot gas. As we all know, in our refrigeration system, discharge of compressor is very hot. The gas goes to the condenser and water or air is used to chill it and make it a liquid. So some part of gas can be bring into the evaporator by having an automatic system and pushed into by closing the liquid feed system, put the hot gas. So the hot gas, which is coming around 80-85 degree, quickly melts the frosting, and you can take back that hot gas into your in terms of liquid into your system, and it can happen in 10 to 15 minutes. So you are not consuming any energy, you don't need any extra pumps, you are not wasting water, and you are saving a lot of time. That's how the hot gas defrosting system is there. In India, earlier the hot gas defrosting was not very popular due to the high cost of the components available. But as the plant started to go bigger and bigger, people started to understand the cost of frosting and also the made in India products available. Defrosting becomes a cheap, lower cost, and has helped save a lot. This is a typical schematic of a hot gas defrosting in a gravity feed system. Many times, particularly if you talk to people in Europe or America, they mostly talk about overfeed systems, and they don't recommend doing in gravity systems. It's like milk. India is as you know, India is the only country, or India is the country where packing the milk in plastic pouch was innovated by NDDB. India is the one who come up with the milk packing in pouches. All over the world, they were packed into the cans, bottles. They were now these these specialized packings, Tetra Paks. India is the only country which has come out with the plastic pouching or the milk pouches. So that's about the cold storage applications in cold storages. But we need a lot of other applications are there. We need to chill the water. We need to, for milk pasteurization, we need to have a low temperature glycol systems when we want to produce pharmaceutical chemicals. Every application, different types of heat exchangers are used. You can see here a plate type heat exchanger provided with a liquid level control, a back pressure regulating valve to maintain a constant pressure at the evaporation, a liquid feed solenoid valve, and a hand expansion valve. This is another plate type heat exchanger. This one is with a U-type heat exchanger connection. This is with a typical accumulator connection. You have a float system. You have a solenoid valve system, which maintains the liquid. You see, the function of this level control is to maintain a constant level in this PHE of ammonia, keep it flooded so that you get maximum heat transfer and efficiency. This is another example of a plate type chiller system. In this, you have the plates and you have the liquid feed system. This one is with the and the back pressure regulation. This is a typical control panel for smaller chiller applications where you can do a fully automation using a simple controller and a small panel. This tank of chillers, you don't need to have very specialized big panels. It can make fully automatic plant using these small components. This is a typical schematic. As I was telling you, you have a PHE or plate type or different types of chillers with accumulator where you provide a level control and the feeding through the solenoid valve, liquid feeding through the solenoid valve. To avoid the freezing of these chillers, you provide a back pressure regulating valve and other controls, the compressor capacity control and other things can make your plant fully automatic. Next, we go to the ammonia liquid overfeed system or the ammonia pump circulation system. This system becomes were there in India since 1995-96, but become very popular around 2004-2005. You should give credit to some of the very senior faculties from India, particularly Mr. Ramesh Paranjpe, who has written a lot of articles about ammonia pump systems presented in different platforms. He is the one who made Indian contractors, consultant designers very comfortable in designing this ammonia liquid overfeed systems. What is difference between a gravity feed system and a liquid overfeed system? If you see this part, the compressor, the condenser, receiver is same. However, when the liquid which is from receiver, the liquid which comes from the receiver, it goes to the low pressure vessel or the pump recirculator vessel. Now here, using this hand expansion, all the expansion device, liquid is expanded to the required temperature. Suppose you want to have a freezing point of -40. So your ammonia liquid is expanded here from this, say 12.5 bar pressure to -0.3 bar pressure, and this liquid is accumulated stored into this vessel at -40. Then we have ammonia pumps here. The ammonia pumps increases the pressure of the ammonia liquid without increasing the temperature. The pressure is normally increased in a level such that it overcomes all the circulation drops. Because this is a very low pressure liquid, it cannot travel all the way. But by pump, you can increase it around by 1.5 to 2 kg per centimeter square pressure. And that pressure will go into your different parts of the evaporator. Now the liquid is fed through this pump outlet to the evaporator. And then you see this is a typical evaporator as I was talking about with a hot gas defrosting arrangement. So we have a liquid feed solenoid valve. We have here a flow regulating valve. Now what happens is here, it is all in pump vessel, we already have an expanded liquid. So the liquid which is coming from pump is expanded liquid, little bit pressure, higher pressure. So you cannot use a normal expansion valve here because normal expansion valves are designed for a high pressure drop. So you have to use here a very special control valve which will generate very small pressure drop depending on to the pump pressure and the pressure drop across the evaporator. So here you have a specialized flow control valves. Where, another function of this flow control valve, or this called also called the metering valve, is here you can set the flow required into the evaporator depending on your evaporator capacity. So individual evaporators can have an individual flow. Even though the outlet of the pump flow is same, you can have a different flow into different evaporators, and irrespective of the variation into the inlet of the flow, outlet of this flow remains constant. So what we have is liquid feed, a wet return line. We have a solenoid valve in the wet return line. We have a supply solenoid valve into the hot gas line. And we have a condenser return valve for the releasing the condensed return. So what happens in hot gas, normally liquid will come in. These pumps are normally designed for higher flow capacity so as to make sure that all the evaporators are fully flooded. Typically, depending on the plant requirement, the circulation ratio is called can be 1:2, 1:3, 1:4, or as high as 1:6. It means that whatever the liquid is fed here, One part of the liquid will evaporate, that is the required liquid, and rest of the, like it's 1:4. So one part of liquid will come in and evaporate, and three parts of liquid and the gas, and one part of gas will come back into the low pressure vessel. This is to make sure that all is 100% liquid is fed into the evaporator, more than required liquid is fed, so that we can have a 100% weighted surface into evaporator and get the maximum heat transfer. So in normal condition, you will have a liquid coming in and liquid gas going back into your pump vessel. When we want to implement hot gas defrosting, we'll cut off the liquid feed, keep running the plant for some time, and let the ammonia, the liquid in the evaporator gets evaporated and fed back into the pump vessel. Then you close the return wall, the wall in the return line. You start the hot gas solenoid valve. Hot gas will come into the evaporator. Now evaporator is at lower temperature, and hot gas may be at say 80 degrees, 75 degree. So what happens is here, this gas starts condensing. It starts becoming liquid, and slowly the temperature of the evaporator starts increasing. Typically, when you reach a temperature of around 10 degree, all the frost in the evaporator is melted. At the same time, the ammonia pressure also rises. You have a defrost relief valve over here, which can be set to around corresponding 10 degrees centigrade or around 5.5 to 5 bar pressure, which will drain all the liquid back into the system. It can be taken into LP vessel, or it can be taken into an intermediate vessel if we have a multiple high stage booster or low temperature intermediate vessels. This is how the hot gas defrosting circuit works. In this LP vessel, when the liquid ammonia comes in, the liquid falls down, goes back into the through pump into the system, and only gas gets separated and goes to the compressor. We can have, as I was telling you, we can have multiple temperatures in different applications depending on your requirement. You can have a +5 degree to -40 degree. So for that applications, you can have a back pressure regulating valves. Automation part is being taken care by compressor control system. You have the ammonia detection system, the safety valves, level control for the pump vessel. We'll see more detailed controls for the pump vessel later on. Automatic purging systems, ammonia purification system, all can be implemented. This schematic shows you what can be implemented into a refrigerant plant. So this is the in a liquid overfeed system or pump overfeed system. The LP vessel or the pump recirculation is the most critical part. Here we have a vessel in which expanded liquid is stored, and through this pipe it's fed to the ammonia pumps. Through ammonia pumps, the liquid is fed into the through this line is fed to the system, and the gas will come back into the this LP vessel, and liquid and gas will come back. Liquid will fall down and gas will go back to the compressor. Here we need to, normally we use either a level transmitter and high-low level float switches, or you use 3-level switches. The function of this level controller, the center one is to control the on-off of the solenoid valve. The second one is to maintain a minimum level into a low pressure receiver. And third one is to protect surges of liquid into the ammonia to compressor. So this can be a high level trip, this is a low level trip, and this is a control device. Why we need these three? See, these are the centrifugal pumps, and to operate these pumps, you need to maintain central NPSH or net positive suction pressure. Liquid has to be there in ammonia. Pump has to always be filled with the liquid to operate these pumps. So this low level maintains a constant level in the evaporator such that this NPSH2 pump is maintained. In case lower level try to go below the low level, then it can switch off the pump and protect the pump. Then we have a differential pressure switch across the pump, so that there is a pump pressure try to go very low, then it can trip the pump. When we have a bigger systems, we have multiple pumps, maybe one working and one standby. So we put up a non-return valve in a pump outlet. So if one pump is not working and another one is working and another one is not working, then the pressure will not come on to the non-working pump. So this is a typical pump vessel installed in the plant. This one is for -35. You can see the level controllers, solenoid valves, the ammonia pumps. As I was talking about hot gas defrosting, you can make a hot gas defrosting circuit. I just explained how it works, so I'll not go more detail. Here, this very important part which I'll talk about is the wall in the wet return line. The wall in the wet return line is on the low pressure side. So it has to have a very, very low or minimum pressure drop. So most of the time it is a gas powered wall. Gas powered wall means hot gas which has been fed into the evaporator partially used to operate this wall. So this wall will not operate on a typical pressure drop across the wall, but will operate by the external hot gas. Like we have a pneumatic walls into the process line. This is a wall which operates through the hot gas available in the plant. So no extra energy required. As I was talking more and more about level control, I said we use level control. So different types of level controls and solenoid valve schemes are used. You can have a float chamber and electronic controller. The float chamber will generate an inductive signal which is sensed by the controller and gives signal to operate your solenoid valves, or it can generate operate your alarms. Then we have mechanical float switches. In mechanical float switches, construction, you have a ball and you have a ball and you have a magnetic switch. So when level goes up into this ball goes up, when level goes up, ball goes up and the magnetic switch operates, which gives you a change over contact. You can have a level transmitters, immersion types. You can have a cable type transmitters. The solenoid valves, liquid line solenoid valves, you have a direct operating solenoid valves, or also you have a pilot operated solenoid valves. The solenoid valves are all direct operating. It means that when you give supply of 230 volts, the valve will open. It will lift the plunger, and smaller valves, the port will directly open. For larger valves, when you give the supply, the pilot valve will open and the inlet force will force the piston to open, and liquid will pass through this. Most of the time, the solenoid valves are fitted with the filters or strainers, because the solenoid valve pistons are the gap between the piston and valve body is very, very small. So you do not want any foreign particles to come in and stuck the operation. So it is normally provided with the filters. It can be along with the valve, or it can be installed separately depending on the size of the plant. Please remember that in ammonia and water are soluble things, and there is no ammonia dryer like you have in Freon systems. So separation has to be done through the filters only, strainers. Then, like we talk about thermostatic expansion valve or the motorized expansion valves, the most popular parts are the hand expansion valves, or so-called the hand regulating valves. In hand expansion valves, you can have a cone type valve, or we have a needle type valve. Needle type valve is more accurate for giving you a higher pressure drop, and it can be very precisely adjusted. The function of expansion valve is to drop the high pressure which is coming from the liquid to the desired temperature. Then we'll talk something about safety parts, which is like we have safety switches in compressor to protect compressor from low suction pressure, high discharge pressure, or oil differential pressure. Safety valves, most important thing, your plant has to be protected with the pressure vessels, has to be protected with a safety valve. They have to be protected with a dual manifold and safety valve. The function of dual manifold is one valve is connected and one valve is bypassed. So when we have when one valve pops up, we can operate the spindle and take the valve for the another valve for servicing or replacement. Typically, a good safety valve will operate at a set pressure with less than 10% margin. It means you are set at say 300 psi. It should open before 310% and close, like it should open before 330 psi fully, and should close before 270 psi. So the main advantage of this operation is saves a lot of on the refrigerant release. It protects environment, protects the effects onto the leakage of the refrigerant, and also operates at keeps the system stable. How you calculate the safety valve capacity? This is the formula which is given by the ASHRAE standard 15 and IR standard 1 to calculate your capacity. The C is the capacity of your capacity required for your safety valve. F is the correction factor. For ammonia, it is 0.5. And D, when you are in IP, it is 0.5 and SI 0.04. And D is the diameter of the vessel, and L is the length of the vessel. You can select the, you can calculate this. Once you calculate the capacity required, the manufacturers normally give you chart of the, this is for air. So when this is given for air, the manufacturers gives you chart for the safety valve at different pressures, the capacity air. So you have to select a safety valve higher than the calculated valve. Normally, when these safety valves are installed into the plant, we need to make sure that those are released. Those safety is released properly. What is the proper way of releasing the safety? The system is make a one common header, connect your all safety valves outlet to one, take this pipe outside. This has to be at least 20 meters higher than any nearby window or the door where human being is accessible, and you can into the air. Ammonia gas is lighter than air. When it goes into the mixes with the air, the ammonia does not have any life in the atmosphere, so it immediately dissolves into air. And once ammonia is mixed with the air, the toxicity of ammonia becomes non-effective. So you design a proper release system, and you can have no effects of ammonia. Most important safety part, ammonia detection system. We need to install sensors so that ammonia can leak detection can be done and alarms can be operated. As I told you, ammonia gas is lighter than air. So whenever it leaks, it goes up. So you install sensors of higher level, and maybe on your pressure vessels, on valve stations, compressors, so that in case of ammonia leaks, the gas will go up, the sensor will sense and give signal. You can have, should have a battery backup or UPS system. So even if your power supply fails, ammonia leak detection system works continuously. These are typical recommended settings depending on manned area or unmanned area. Like cold storage, inside the cold storage, there may not be the people. So there has to be a very low level of setting. Whereas the plant rooms, there are people and sometimes they smell the ammonia. You can have a higher operating settings. That depends on company to company, and many companies, some of the companies even have the alarm at 10 ppm. Second part is leakage. As I talk about ammonia toxicity, whenever we are draining something from plant, leakage of ammonia is possible. Most critical is draining the oil. When you are draining the oil, you are opening the valve. So it is possible that there could be ammonia also come along with the oil. So what has been done is provided with a spring-loaded valve, or also called as a dead man's valve. Dead man's valve is a valve. If in case of any accident, a person operating the valve becomes unconscious, valve should automatically close. It is a spring-loaded valve. So when you want to drain the valve, open this valve, operate the handle, oil will drain. And once your oil is released, the handle, valve will close automatically. Once your drainage is complete, you close the valve, operate the handle again. So anything tapped into this will be released and its draining is complete. This is a very important and very, very important valve, because normally this valve is a multi-ton valve. And when this valve is around 14 to 18 tons, depending on manufacturer. So when valve is open, ammonia starts leaking, it becomes very difficult for the operator to close. So these are all safety devices. Let's talk about the other important energy saving safety equipment. I'll try to go through that because we have a limited time. The air and the water, these are the two important things which affects the performance of any refrigerant system, not only ammonia. Why? Because pressure is additive. We have refrigerant pressure, and if there is non-condensable gases or air into the plant, actual pressure is high. It means that if If we have theoretically at our 35-degree condensing, our pressure should be 13.5. But if this air we can have, if air is there and is 1 kg pressure, our actual pressure would be 14.5. So this is the excess pressure, which is the air pressure. And you can very easily check and measure whether your plant has ammonia or not. It's very simple. Whatever the liquid gas coming from your receiver, you know the pressure on your receiver. You measure the temperature of the liquid into the receiver, convert into the saturated pressure corresponding this temperature. The temperature difference is your air. So what is to be done with this air? Air has to be removed immediately because air does not condense or it does not evaporate in the refrigerant system. So what happens is it remains like a free passenger traveling on a train. It increases the power cost. As I told you, the pressure increases. It decreases the refrigerant efficiency. It affects the performance of your compressor bearings, compressor gaskets, compressor temperature rises. It's also lead to the ammonia explosion, breaking ammonia into nitrogen and hydrogen. Typical, this chart shows that if you have a 0.5%, your pressure will rise by 1%. But if you have 4% air, your pressure will rise by 7 psi. Then you have 6.5% excess power, which is very high when you're talking about a 500 kilowatt system. So what we have to do is put up an automatic purging system. Automatic purging system will continuously check the plant and remove any gas or the non-condensable gases or the air. The advantages: no need of manual purging system, no need of shutting down the plant, doing the manual purging, no need to depend on operators to remove it, and no risk of operator life. And I'll not say disadvantages. Actually, when it's written is little bit. What we need is little bit initial capital cost and maybe some maintenance of the components used in the purger. But what we have here is that if you see, if there is a manual purging happening, though there is no purging, your pressure is rising. Manual purging, the pressure will drop down. Then again there is no purging, your pressure will rise, and when it is purging, it is drop down. So this becomes a cycle, like, and you spend this energy every time when you are not purging. Whereas auto purging will maintain a constant design pressure, and there's no excess pressure. So you're operating at lower condensing temperature. You have a higher energy efficiency. This is a calculation showing actual results which you have obtained from a freezing plant of -40 at 500 kilowatt. I'll just not go into detail by just having a less. If you have a 1.5 kg pressure extra than the design pressure, then you save around 6,85,000 rupees. It's almost $10,000 in a year. Where, sorry, now the rate has gone up, so it can be around $9,000. And for a potato cold storage, we just operating at -10 degrees centigrade. It saves you around 5 lakh rupees, or around 6,000 to 7,000 US dollars. So if you consider good good product available, payback period can be less than a year. This is a typical purger installation. The purger operations, your purge points are very important, just to be taken from the outlet of the condenser. Different applications are shown over here, from the PHE evaporative condenser, or even your atmospheric condenser. Everywhere it can be used. These are some of the installation drawings of the purger. I will not explain into detail because we have limited time available. Second part, I was trying to tell you about water. Water is when water has got a very high affinity with ammonia. So when it mixes, it becomes from anhydrous ammonia, it becomes anhydrous ammonia. In the refrigeration system, we need 99.95% pure ammonia. But if water is there, ammonia become anhydrous. So what actually it means is that if our temperature is 30 degrees, it can have a 30% ammonia can mix into water. If it is 0 degree, it can be 46, and -30, it can be 100%. So what this mean? What happens is when ammonia is mixed with the So all the refrigeration chart is based on the purity of ammonia. It means 99.95% pure ammonia. Now, if you have a unpure ammonia or ammonia with water, you have a 10% ammonia, which is theoretically operating at minus 0.3 bar pressure, will give you minus 40. But if you are operating 10%, you will operate it only at minus 38.6. So it will means you are almost losing 2 degrees centigrade. It means to achieve the same temperature, you have to operate at lower suction pressure, consume more air you need, and you may also will lose the refrigeration efficiency. The refrigeration efficiency means you run higher cost, the more corrosion of ammonia and coming into the contact, and other effects like them. I will just show you what are the effects in there in the next few slides. How the water comes in. As air comes in into, air can come in when the oil is charged or where there is a leakage and plant is operating at the lower than atmospheric pressure. The air, instead of ammonia coming out, air will come in. Similarly, water will come in because of when the vessels are manufactured and hydro-tested, water is not properly removed. When the installation is on the site, sometimes the dew accumulates into the pipes and other things kept there not properly clean. Sometimes the heat exchangers like chillers or condensers, there's a leakage and water side get mixed up with the ammonia. And when air comes into the ammonia, it also brings in the moisture from the air. The air purger will remove the moisture. It will remove the air, but the moisture will remain in the system. So all these things contributes the accumulation of water into the our refrigeration plant. What happens is with that, it causes the corrosion. Oil, when it is mixed with the water, the oil aging starts, oil quality deteriorates, oil starts forming organic acids and sludge into the compressors and other parts. Wear and tear of compressor goes up, oil need to frequently change the oil, and it increases the service and maintenance cost. There are, because of the water sludges into the ammonia, the pressure drop across the pipe increases. The effects of the pump and the evaporators are adversely affected, because remember, air accumulates on high pressure side because it is lighter than ammonia, whereas ammonia is accumulates on the low pressure side because the partial pressure of ammonia is much lower than the pressure of partial pressure of water is lower than the pressure of ammonia. And we have to operate that lower suction pressure. You need more capacity. You need so increases cost. See, these are some of the photographs showing the effects of water and sludge formation on compressor, whether it's on the bearings, on the screw, on the body. You can see the piston, the crankcase, how the sludge and water contamination damages the compressor. You can see this photograph shows the water accumulated along with the oil into the oil level of compressor. The filters, this is how they get choked, soil filters. This is how the water has been there along with the oil. So this all makes your cost. Of course, there is the bearings life goes down tremendously with the percentage of water in oil. If you have 0.%, your life is almost reduced from 250 to 25%. So this is really very critical part. So I said it happens in low pressure side, whether in pump receivers or evaporators, suction accumulators, in two-stage systems on lower side. So I was trying to tell you, at 0 degree, water pressure is 0.6 kPa, whereas in ammonia is 329. And even at 15 degree, water pressure is 1.71, and ammonia is 629. So what happens is here is that, irrespective when the water comes into the evaporator side, even though your ammonia, this at suction pressure, say 3.6 kg at 2 degree, ammonia will evaporate. The water will continuously remain in the system, and that water starts accumulating. We can check the contamination of water in the refrigeration system. These are the equipments required when you have to have. What you have to do is use this ammonia sampler, connect low pressure side liquid into this, get it into the sampler, throw away the first sample and get another sample, second sample from the same location. Typically, you take a 100 ml sample, keep it into ambient temperature, but not into directly exposed to the sun, but into the room or the laboratory at around 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. Slowly, the water ammonia inside this will evaporate. The water is remaining is a water. You can see over here actual photograph showing around almost 30 ml of remaining water. What we can do is have an ammonia dehydrator. Ammonia dehydrator is a device which removes water from the refrigeration plant, oil, dirt, and use your pure ammonia continuously online. This can be installed in a running plant, which saves a lot of energy. What we have here is that we use heat from the high pressure receiver, spread through a coil into this, and is again taken back into the lithium line. So we tap a low temperature liquid from LLP vessel or the evaporator, and when it comes here, if there is ammonia, it will get evaporated because of the liquid of this coil, temperature of the coil, gas will go back into the system, and whatever the water or oil or dirt is there, it will accumulate at the bottom. So initially everything, all this part will be covered with a frosting when it is ammonia, and when water starts accumulating, the frosting will go and you can drain the liquid from the bottom wall. What is the cost of the, this is a case study which we have done and installed. So typically you have a booster compressor of 300 kilowatts in a high stage booster system, which is at -40, -7. You consume, because of the water, instead of -40, you're operating at -2. You spend around 2.8 lakh rupees or almost 4,000 US dollars. Whereas it is two-stage compressors or compound compressors, -40, -2, same operating condition. You spend 10 kilowatt extra per hour and spend around 3,60,000 Indian rupees in a year. So this is the cost you are paying for the water into your system. Then let's go into some part of electronic automation. Like we have because our topic is automation. All these controls which I have exposed, whether it's the solenoid valve or the pressure regulating valve or the defrosting stations, the purging systems, the deadman valve, all are a very important part of this control of the automation part. Without these are we call as the final actuating devices. Without the devices, no electronic automation can perform well. Typically, if you have a potato cold storage or a positive temperature cold storage, you can have a temperature humidity sensing because you want to maintain higher humidity, higher temperature, so that you do not lose the moisture into the product and saves onto, not waste your does not shrink the product and waste lose the weight of the product. Then we need to maintain in evaporators. We have the wall station, so we need to check the maintain the ammonia leachation is not there. We may have to monitor the temperature, humidity inside the room. We have to monitor the CO2 level and operate our exhaust fans or the other systems to maintain CO2 heat recovery systems. We have a CO2 heat recovery system shown over here. So whenever you are taking a fresh air and throwing the cold air out through a heat exchanger, you can pre-chill the fresh air coming in. So this is typically 4 degree. It will go out to around 25, and this 35 degree air will come into at around 18 to 20 degrees centigrade, which saves the load onto the evaporator. Then we have the cold room alarms, or we call it the man trap alarms. So in case a person is trapped into the cold room and cannot open door from inside, then he can have this switch. This is the illuminated push button provided inside. You will push this switch. You will get a centralized alarm, audio, video, visual alarm, which is with inbuilt battery backup. So a person in plant room can understand somebody's trapped into a cold room. You can have a local displays. We can have a centralized displays using a data logger, monitor onto the computer, monitor onto the mobile, operate your plants through mobile. This is a typical cold storage arrangement. Once you have a data, you can convert it into various forms, in graphical forms, or into the Excel worksheets, and you can analyze data operations and decide your further course of actions. Plant automation. The biggest part of the biggest challenge in ammonia plant is automating your plant room or a machine room. That is automating your condenser, compressors, and the pump vessels. There are two ways of doing it. If you're a smaller plant, you can do it using the discrete controllers. You can have an independent controller for a compressor, a defrost controller for independent room. And based on these independent controllers, you can on and off the compressors automatically. Or you can have a logic with the relay-based logic or the small control logic to operate the plants. Or we can have a centralized PLC systems for a bigger plant, which will show you the complete plant at the system. And you can have everything covered into your system. So all this is possible. So myth that ammonia plant cannot be automated, it gets totally eliminated. It can be automated by using discrete components. It can be automated using PLC systems, and you can have a operator-less plant. Let's go briefly through, considering our time is limited. I'll just quickly get you through a case study which was part of the presentation. It's the upgradation of a 20-year-old ice plant in Odisha, which was producing 10 metric tons of ice per day. It has got an ammonia refrigerant. Piston type compressors were there, 5:1 cylinder ratio, 1 compressor, 2:1 and 4:1. 5:1 was designed with a 1 working and 1 standby condition. It's a natural feed of the gravity fed system. So what was the objective is to upgrade this plant to make it automatic, less dependent on the operators. To implement the implementation has to be done without stopping the production or without affecting the plant. Achieve minimum 20% energy saving, improve plant efficiency, because there were a lot of notices issued by the safety inspector. The total investment has to come down less than a year. And all equipments must be easy to operate, easy to maintain, spare parts and everything must be easily available. So we did a study into the plant and observed a lot of, it is a 20-year-old plant. With the time, a lot of things were missed. Like on compressor side, the compressors, all the compressors, including the standby compressor was running. So just to try to meet the requirement of the capacity, but it was not able to achieve. Still, they were not able to achieve. In fact, running all the compressors fully automatic, they were all manual operations. There was liquid coming to the compressor regularly and affecting the compressors. Please note, all compressors are gas compressors. The liquid cannot be compressed. So we have to have only gas coming into the compressor. Safety systems, safety cutouts, particularly safety cutouts provided to the compressors were bypassed. The main reason of bypass was compressor was operating at very high discharge pressure and very low suction pressure, almost 16 kg discharge pressure and minus 0.1 bar suction pressure. Say this is the actual photograph of a pressure gauge showing 16 bar operating pressure. The ambient temperature, being in Odisha near to the seashore, was 34-35 degrees centigrade. So theoretically, it should be around 30. The cold rooms or the freezers and chiller rooms, the biggest problem was temperature. The desired temperature of minus 25-26 degree was never achieved. Maximum, the lowest temperature achieved was minus 14. There was a manual hot gas defrosting system was provided. It was not able to defrost. You had to run for 1.5 hours or maybe sometimes 2 hours, operate all the valve manually, then always possibility of gland leakages and other issues. When this system was operated manually, the temperature was raised by 10 degrees. Minus 14, minus 15 used to go up into minus 5. So you have to run again a longer times to cool down that temperature. and there was a huge frosting happening into the, because of this frosting, there was lot of heavy humidity was increasing into the chiller rooms. So most of the chillers or the ACUs were not operating. Their capacities were not reaching. It was full with the oil. You can see here how much oil it was filled. Evaporator was filled with the oil, and you can see how much oil was leaking. There was a lot of ammonia was leaking when this oil was drained. The freezer's capacities were not achieved. The plant was provided with a level controller system, but it was not working. Totally in manual operation. The filters were choked and damaged. The heavy sludge and the rust was there into the filters. Because of this, all the coils were always starving of the liquid, not getting the sufficient things. The compressor suction pressure, evaporating temperature, nothing was operating as to the operation. Compressor suction pressure was minus 0.1 kg per centimeter square, which should be at, so which is corresponding to minus 35. So in room you should get at least minus 30 degrees centigrade, but they were able to get only minus 40. Operator has to keep on running to operate these valves, run manually all the system. They were not purging, the air was not purged because they have to shut down the plant, go to the condenser and receiver, use all the PP equipments was not well, operators were not very convenient to go, and the oil removal was very difficult because draining oil, always there was a possibility of ammonia leakage and the walls were not able to close properly. Level gauges, the liquid level was not properly maintained because glass tubes were used and they normally used to break and never replaced. Chiller rooms and were located in different locations in the plant, and many times the loader will get trapped into this plant, and if the power fails or the door get closed, is not able to come out. The PH chillers were there, where there were a lot of these. You can see those flange type valves were used, and these flange type valves, there always a leakage, and operator has to run around to attend these leakages and operate these valves. Safety valves were not working. Mostly they were provided with a stop valve. The stop valve was closed and safety valve was not operational actually. So what we have done is we have decided to implement multiple solutions. First part was to implement a safety part. All the single safety valves were replaced with a dual manifold safety valves. And as per the required pressure, all the stop valves, viewer safety valve were removed, because by that way nobody can isolate those things. A safety relief system was provided, that all the outlets of the safety valve was connected to one common header and brought out above the factory level of around 20 feet above the factory terrace, above factory terrace. So there was no human being get connected in case of a safety valve pops up. All the drain systems were connected with a dead man's wall or the oil drain systems. Ammonia detection system was installed onto the wall stations into the cold rooms, so that in case of any leakage, you get ammonia indication. For avoiding those man trapping, the loaders tapping into the cold room, these man trap alarms were installed. Compressor safety cutouts were repaired and recalibrated and reconnected. All controls were made functional. All flange type valves were replaced with a high pressure 40 bar welded line valves with the back seating and Teflon seat arrangements. Reflect type level gauges were used instead of glass tubes, which avoids the breaking of tubes, leakage of ammonia, and also usually correct indication. Compressors automation was implemented for individual compressor. Each compressor was made automatic independently. So depending on the requirement, operator can decide which compressor he wants to run, start the compressor and let it work automatically. Those are piston compressors, so they are operating manually. I said air purger and the ammonia purifiers were installed. The air purger helped to remove the air. Air from 16 bar was brought down to 12 bar. which is corresponding to ambient temperature. Suction pressure increased from minus 0.1 bar to plus 2 bar once the water was removed from the system by using ammonia purifiers. Hot gas defrosting system was converted into automatic system. See, all the old parts like evaporator, accumulator were all maintained. It was only a retrofitting job conducted into the plant. So with this hot gas defrosting system, automation system was implemented. So nobody has to decide or also defrost the system. It was a time-based system, real-time based system, was programmed to operate at a fixed time intervals in a day. So no need to go and check it. Then the plant was, the major requirement of the owner was to have a remote monitoring. He is a busy man traveling in India and abroad, and he wanted to monitor everything on a mobile. So data logging system with local displays was provided, and he can monitor now everything on a mobile. So what we achieved, room temperature was minus 25 degrees. Evaporating temperature from minus 35 to increase to minus 30 degrees centigrade. Suction pressure increased from minus 0.1 to plus 0.2 kg per centimeter square. Discharge pressure reduced to 12 kg from 16 kg. The compressor automation removed the need of operator to interfere. Compressors loading, unloading, operation on-off was done automatically, and overall requirement of compressor running reduced. The hot gas defrosting removed all the oil accumulated into the coil, so coil performance improved. Number of compressors required were reduced. That means standby compressors started working around as a standby. And most importantly, because of this total low discharge pressure, high suction pressure, and clean our running hours of the compressor were reduced by 25%. Safety parts, safety systems were implemented, man-trap power systems implemented. So no leakage of or harm to the person. The weldable walls made sure that there's no leakage into the flange joints. The automation hot gas system, as I told you, the defrosting time was reduced from 1.5 hours to 15 minutes. Increase in room temperature during the defrost was limited to 2 degrees. So from minus 30, it used to raise only up to minus 25, it may raise up to minus 24, 23, and again, it can be brought down very easily. The most important thing, which was the requirement of customer, was achieving minus 25 degree room temperature was achieved. They were no longer at minus 14. Significant because of the appropriate maintaining the temperatures, defrosting on time. The humidity inside the room was reduced. Freezing operation reduced by 25%. So overall production capacity increased, and also there is a reduction in the power consumption. The coils are always flooded because of the level control solenoid operation, and which has stopped a liquid feeding to the compressor. Operator, no need for operator to throttle any valves. There is no oil accumulation into the ECUs. Oil draining becomes very, very easy because of the valves installed. The defrosting on the freezers coils were removed. Online monitoring system was able to monitor systems anytime. The temperature, because of the temperature control systems, we are able to maintain temperature in 2 degrees centigrade, which saves lot of energy consumption and product quality maintained. The ammonia detection system, the safety valve release system, man-trap alarm systems are as per this was designed as per the OSHA's PMS requirements, which improved the flexibility in working the plant. This overall project was implemented in 2 stages. First stage was safety system implementation. Second stage was automation, more of hot gas defrosting on it, monitoring and other things. Total investment was 31,55,000 Indian rupees, or around say $50,000 US, and the payback period was around 6 months only. And that's what the refrigerant system becomes energy efficient, no leakages, no damages to the environment, reduction in the carbon footprint because operating at lower energy, lower discharge pressure, so heat rejection is reduced. no wastage of ammonia as a refrigerant, power consumption is reduced. So overall low life cycle analysis were generated into the plant. Carbon emission was also reduced. System becomes more green. As you know, ammonia is a green refrigerant operating into better conditions at lower discharge and higher suction, saves a lot of energy and energy consumptions. So that's all I was to talk about. I think I will extend a little bit time, but this is a vast subject. I was not able to cover everything. But thank you very much for ISRE Chennai chapter for giving me this opportunity to talk about automation in ammonia refrigerant. Thank you very much, sir.
So, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
We have some questions in the question and answer box. You can just read out on the next.
Sure, sir. I'll take the screen share back or I'll keep it as it is.
You can continue the screen sharing, sir.
Okay, sir.
So to start with, you have a question from Mr. Lakshman Subramanian. Power consumption between ammonia and Ferron systems have not been done on a common condensing temperature. Ammonia system is water cooled while Ferron system is air cooled.
Yeah, it is done like that because that is what in our observations. We have seen in cold storages applications, Freon systems are installed with air-cooled condensers where there's been introduced as the fit and forget units. So that is what actually been installed. We have did it site studies and we compare it when we have done with the actual ammonia system is always a water cooled one. So we have compared those actual systems.
Okay. So the next question is from Mr. Samesh Kakeri.
But here, if it's okay, I can. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. The next question is from Mr. Samesh Kakeri. RCC4 controller is used for which type of compressor?
That is used for a two-stage piston compressors.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Any other question?
Next question is from Mr. Ravindra Kumar Yadav. In spite of very attractive properties of ammonia, why it is still used in domestic applications? It is still not used in the domestic application, he's asking.
The main limitation of using ammonia in domestic or the commercial small capacity is the unavailability of the smaller capacity compressors. Normally, ammonia compressors are available in 20 kilowatt and above capacities. But recent development has taken place in Europe. Smaller capacity like 5 kilowatt, 7 kilowatt compressors are developed. As I am in touch with some of the Indian manufacturers who are also trying to develop a very low capacity ammonia compressors and expecting to be launched in another 6 months time. So once the smaller capacity of the compressors are available, we can definitely have ammonia into domestic or the commercial applications.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Mr. Arun. Any filtration is required after safety release valve before ambient outlet?
No, sir. No filtration is required because ammonia, as I told you, is natural refrigerant. It does not have any atmospheric life. Atmospheric life of ammonia is 0. It means the moment it gets mixed into the atmosphere, it loses its toxicity. Typically, ammonia 1 has to 20, like you have a 20 times air mixed into the ammonia toxicity becomes 0. So when it is properly vented into the atmosphere, because of the lighter weight of the ammonia than air, it will go above and mix into the atmosphere, and there is no filtration is required.
Okay. Any participants, if you want to interact with the speaker, please raise your hand. So that we will enable you to talk. So next question is from Mr. Satinder Singh. What is the working principle of back pressure valve? Can we use it with all systems, DX system, gravity feed, and pump feed systems?
All controls can be used in any type of applications. They are the common ones. The function of back pressure valve is basically a valve which senses the inlet pressure of the valve, and then you have a pilot control, which is a diaphragm type control. And when you have a set pressure on the diaphragm, when the inlet pressure or the evaporator pressure increases than the set pressure on the pilot valve or the diaphragm, the inlet pressure will pass through this pilot valve to the servo piston on a valve, and it will operate the main piston, and valve will start opening. Depending on the set pressure difference and the inlet pressure, valve opening will reduce and increase. And then you will have actual control of constant control of your back pressure or the evaporator pressure.
Okay. So the next question is from Mr. Mohammed Javid Liriat. If you are connecting two loads with different ET, how much percentage of electricity we are spending more? Suppose we have a connected 130 kilowatt ET and 32 and 100 kilowatt ET at 43 with the same vessels with single compressor.
So, that depends. This connecting two different temperature loads is a typical decision to be taken on the operation, on the capacity of the loads. Like I told you, you have an ice plant, which is you are producing say 20 tons of ice per day, and your refrigeration capacity of that ice plant is around 45 TR, whereas your cold storage, which stores the ice, its capacity is of around 2 TR. Then you can connect it into the same compressor, even though you are operating at -10 and -2, and very little effect will be there. But if you are having a -40, 100 kilowatt, and you want to put it, say, another 100 kilowatt at -25, then definitely you are going to spend a lot of energy on it. So it's totally a decision of your system design, depending on your two different temperature loads, and also the availability of your and running time of your plant. For example, your -40 and -25, you are running -25 only for 2 hours, and you are running -40 for 16 hours, then you can combine. But if you are both are running for -16 hours, then you should not combine, and you should operate separately.
Okay. Mr. Lakshman Subramanian, you are unable to talk. You can unmute and speak to the speaker.
Yes, sir. There was this question about, sir, I just like to answer this question. You said that it was shown for two different conditions. This is a COP chart which has been there at +40. +40, that is all the refrigerants are compared at the same condensing temperature. You can very easily see the coefficient of performance.
Definitely, definitely ammonia is a superior refrigerant, no doubt about it.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible to have an air-cooled system for ammonia?
Yes, sir. Nowadays, a lot of air-cooled systems in ammonia are becoming popular. Particularly, they are very popular in the regions like Middle East, because scarcity of the water. In India also, now a lot of air-cooled systems are coming up. I have personally done one. Yes, sir.
Particularly in Chennai, where water is a problem.
Sir, Chennai can have air-cooled ammonia systems. Absolutely, there is no problem, because Chennai has a water scarcity. You can have air-cooled ammonia systems in Chennai.
Is there any limitation on the sizes in air-cooled system?
Absolutely no, sir. We have a lot of these capacities condensers are available, and I will recommend to go, with adiabatic cooling system with a air-cooled condenser, which will save a lot of energy and water in Chennai.
Yeah. That anyway people do. Thanks, Mr. Joshi. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Girish Pai, you are unable to talk. You can unmute and speak to the speaker.
Good evening, Anandji.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. So whatever the systems you have displayed on this PPT presentation, can you go, I have two questions. One, can you share with the attendees? One. Second, can this all system can be fitted in our existing working plant? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can do the retrofitting. Most of the systems can be retrofitted into existing working plant, and I will share this. I'll convert this PDF. This PPT size is little bigger, so I'll convert into PDF file, and I'll share with the Chennai chapter. So if they have the email address of the attendees, they can send it to them.
Please. Thank you, sir. So kind of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sure, sir. As per your wish, we will share the informations and presentations to the people who have registered their email IDs in the registration file.
Yes, sir.
Next question we have from Mr. Mohammed Jawad Liaquat. What is the average life of a well-maintained ammonia refrigeration plant with a screw compressor and piston compressor?
So it's a very good question, because that's totally decides your ROI and how much money you put in and how much you make profits. So thank you very much for asking this question. Typically, for a system ROI calculation, plant life is considered around 15 years, whether you use a piston compressor or screw compressor, because it's totally dependent on how you maintain the system. In my experience, I have seen plants as old as 40 years old using the 40 years old compressors, which are very well maintained, even the piston compressors or even screw compressors I've seen more than 30 years old running. It's totally, ammonia is a natural refrigerant. So if you maintain the plant correctly, you have upgradations done on time, and it works. 15 years is considered as a on paper cost or the life of the plant. But of course, people have in India, as you know, our country is a conservative country, don't want to spend money. People use it in for 35 years, 40 years. You may have to do the plant audits after certain times, check the thicknesses of your pressure vessels or your piping, may have to replace those things or upgrade some of the automation control system. But overall, the plant works.
Okay. Is there anybody else wanted to interact with the speaker? I think Mr. Nagendran want to interact. Mr. Nagendran, you are unable to talk. You can unmute and you can interact with the speaker.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, good evening. Hello.
Yeah, good evening,
Good evening, Mr. Nagendran. You are audible.
Yes, sir.
You can speak.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, actually, I want to know what is the suction and
I can ask question.
hello. Yeah, what is the suction pressure
Yes,
and
sir.
discharge pressure for ammonia, sir, in PSI? Can you tell one, sir?
That depends on your application and temperature, sir. Ammonia can be used as low as minus 45 degrees centigrade.
Okay.
So that can be almost around to minus 0.6 kg per centimeter square gauge pressure, and typically discharge pressure depends on your water temperature and your wet bulb temperature and condenser design. In India, condensing temperature can vary from 35 to 40 degree condensing. So pressure can be around 12.5 to 14.5 degree, 14.5 kg per centimeter square.
Okay, sir.
That's a totally your system design requirement, sir. Ammonia can work in a very wide temperature range.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thanks for the informative sessions.
Thank you, sir.
We have one more question from Mr. Mohammed Javid Liak. What is the boundary line between Ferron and ammonia system in the sense of capacity, kilowatt? At what minimum required capacity we should decide to go for ammonia instead of Ferron?
So, typically, I'll say that any plant which is a positive temperature plant above 50 TR or say 150 kilowatt, you should go for ammonia. Or any low temperature plant, even as low as 25 TR or say 80 kilowatts, you should go for ammonia.
Okay, sir. So with this, we come to the end of the session. We have almost addressed all the participants' questions, and as really you also directly interacted with the participants. I request Mr. Arivalagan, our President-elect, to deliver a vote of thanks.
Good evening to all. Am I audible, sir?
Audible.
Yes, sir, you are.
As a part of World Refrigeration Day, I'm happy that our program team has chosen an apt topic for this webinar and a most apt and eminent speaker to talk on the topic. As is often said, that
Arivalagan, sir, you've been muted. Can you unmute and speak?
Opportunity to thank profusely our speaker, Mr. Anand Sriram Joshi, General Manager, Manik Engineers, also the President of Ammonia Association of Ammonia Refrigeration, for having delivered a wonderful lecture in a manner which shows his passion for ammonia technology with his 3 decades of experience in the field. He has rightly demystified the myths about ammonia as proposed by, given by non-ammonia technologists, covering various aspects of ammonia systems